Hi, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm. I'm Sarah Sinacroce, I'm your host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you are an entrepreneur who is fed up with the traditional marketing model and are ready for a paradigm shift. Today's episode is about the P of people in my mandala for conscious marketing, and more specifically about telling stories to our people. I have invited my friend Dominic de Souza, who's a current participant of the Gentle Marketing Revolution program. And he's also the founder of his own agency called Dream Again Marketing. I was super excited to talk to Dominic about storytelling, also kind of out of my own interest, because it was something that I was trying to wrap my head around in my own business. And as you'll discover in our conversation, it seems like there's a switch that needs to be turned on to activate the right brain. And until that switch is on, your left brain will keep wanting to take over and create ad-like content instead of stories. You'll find out exactly what I mean by listening to our conversation. So I'm super grateful to Dominic for having turned on my switch. And literally last night, I couldn't sleep because I had so many story ideas going through my head. Everything became a story. So I'm excited about what that means for my future emails and podcasts and, Facebook Lives and all of that. So let me tell you a bit more about Dominic. Dominic was born in New Zealand, raised in Australia. He studied in Fiji and France, and he's now living in the US with his wife and 6-year-old daughter. He wrote his first novel at the age of 13, which charged down a path of discovery. And it made him realize that he could literally do and finish anything. And in the last 15 years, Dominic has been fortunate to work with amazing people. Each of them have strong stories and vibrant visions, but none of them leaned into their story to spellbind audiences. So that's why in 2019, he started Dream Again Marketing. So without further ado, here's my conversation about storytelling with Dominic. Enjoy. Hi, Dominic. So good to have you with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go right into the stories with you because that's what you're good at. And I remember when we talked offline, you told me this story about cutting hay in Tennessee and a cow that almost crushed you to the floor. And I want you to take us right into that story if you could.
Okay, so absolutely. So that's either one of the high points or the low points in my life, depending on which way you're looking.
Okay.
I had just lost a job that I had gotten married and lined up my life to head back to Australia. I was living in the United States at the time. And I was trying to head back to Australia for that job. And then I lost my passport and my travel papers and everything. So I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere. And so I had no place to live, no place to stay, just got married. And so we were bundled off to go stay with her parents down in Tennessee. And I didn't have any work. I didn't know what to do. I actually never applied for jobs, never learned how to do that. I'd always had sort of opportunities. So I'm now trying to figure out how to make job working work. And while I'm there working with her grandparents, I'm helping out. So her grandparents lived on this farm. And the granddad was an ex-Marine. He was this little wizened guy, hard as nails, ex-trucker. He was in the Navy, during like the Bay of Pigs incident in Cuba. And so he was always doing something. So he raised cows on the side, and he would cut and bale hay. And so I would travel out with him a bunch to roll these massive bales of hay, be rolling them around fields, and I'd be sneezing my brains out. I guess I have hay fever. And it was just absolutely no control from my nose. Very embarrassing for somebody who likes to wear suits. And then at one point he
Are you a
decided,
big guy, Dominic? Like, give people kind of this
oh,
picture.
yeah, I don't know, 5'9", and I'm now like, 165 pounds. So not that big. My family's kind of a small family, sort of Brazilian Irish background. So at one point he's trying to sell a cow, and it's a mother cow. Time for it to take her down to the market. And we're trying to get her on this trailer. And so he's got this pen rigged up in the barn that's funneling the cow into the trailer. The cow just won't go. And we're trying to catch the baby to get her in there. And so at one point he manages to work some magic and he shoves a gate and she barrels up into the trailer and then slams the door on her. And then above the door is a wooden bar that's just tied down as kind of like a head gate. And we're now trying to catch this little calf. And it's running around the barn, kicking up hay and cow manure and, trying to stay away from us. And of course, the mother is panicking in that trailer and she's rocking it around. And I am getting kind of worried because I don't want that thing bursting through the door. I mean, these things have horns. They weigh almost a ton. And we're messing around with its baby. And I've read my whole life about, you don't touch baby bears and when their mama's around, stuff like that. So we finally managed to grab this thing and we're pulling it close and she thinks that we're going to kill it or something. And she jumps up and smashes through that wooden headboard over the door. And I'm crouching trying to hold this thing. And I'm looking up and I have a full ton of angry black and white cow coming down at me. It's like, this is not the way the world works. Things that big aren't supposed to be coming down at you. The granddad's first reaction was to shove me towards the railings, and we're both trying to jump, to get out of there because we don't want a ton of cow horn. This is like running from the bulls in Barcelona, right?
Right.
So we both are up on those railings as fast as possible. And she doesn't pay attention to us. She just grabs that baby and herds it back into the darkness of the barn. And that was it. We didn't try doing that again that day. We both just went to get some iced tea or something. And at that point, I went back up to the attic where I had my my laptop. And I'm just thinking, okay, the farm is great. I really need to figure something out. We can't stay here, doing this a bunch. I almost died here. So yeah.
You're like, I'm not made for this. I need another career.
Some people are. I write about it. I'm not sure I do as well living it. So
that's so interesting. Did you ever write that story and publish it or just on a blog or anything
no,
like that?
You're the first person I've ever actually shared this with.
Now a whole bunch of other people who are listening. So I thought that was just such a great story to start this conversation around storytelling with, because it takes you right into that moment, and the way you tell it. Yeah, you can just picture the granddad and, picture the hay flying around, you sneezing. So excellent demonstration of what storytelling is all about, right? So let's talk about storytelling. So why do you think that it's, so important today compared to maybe 5-10 years ago? What has changed?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think from a very meta point of view, it's all about left brain versus right brain stuff. So, left brain communication is very data, broadcasting, so on. Right brain is very much about community meaning, emotion, communication, that kind of thing. And I think that's why a lot of us hunger for stories, and why we are slow to be adopting them as part of our brand strategy, personal strategy, or just how we do them at all. It's because you have to let go of the analytical data side, the outcome-based whatever, and you get into why stories matter and what they do and how they create connection, because that's what stories do. They create meaning and connection between people. So most ads are broadcasted at us. And we've had this for about a century of business. It's just been, a company stands up and says, my product is the best, you should buy me. My other my competition is rubbish, don't buy from them. And for 100 years, we've not been able to do anything. We've had no ability to respond to this. Well, all of a sudden we get social media, and now we can talk to each other with anybody, anywhere. And we're beginning to realize that we don't like to be challenged by an ad. We don't like to be told what to think. We like to make our own decisions. And that's what stories do. Stories don't necessarily demand that you accept something. They invite you to accept a worldview or an attitude. And then your purchase is a commitment to that, right? It's you buying into that, not just buying something. And then on the flip side, ads that are based around stories work phenomenally well, which is why we all tune in to watch the Super Bowl. And even people who hate sports tune in to watch the Super Bowl, because the stories in those ad breaks are phenomenal. And then those stories stick, they last, they endure throughout the whole rest of the year. They make it into the top 10 lists, and people enjoy them and share them with families and get-togethers, because stories tell us something about ourselves. There's this fantastic thought in Seth Godin's book, This Is Marketing, where he says, people like us do things in this way. That's what a community is. That's what a tribe is. It's people who get together, who say to each other, people like us do things in this way. And we create stories that sort of encapsulate those ideas. And we share them. And when other people like what those stories say, they agree. And by agreeing, they sort of joining that community. So I like to say ads create a buyer, but stories create community, and that is so much more long lasting.
Wow, I wrote down so many things that I want to just underline and say again. The first thing you said is demand versus invite. So ads, they demand something, right? They demand that you buy, or they kind of prove a point and then they say, here, buy this now. Where stories, they invite to join people like us, do things the way we do them, right?
Yeah.
And then what I also loved is that you mentioned the difference between buying into something versus simply buying. And that is so powerful. And the other thing you said, we had a century of, society being run a certain way and corporations running ads and all of that. And in a way, it's what we're saying is the customer, us, we've just gotten way more, like we've gotten smarter. We want to make our own decisions. And I see that, for example, at the doctors, right? We go to the doctor and we kind of already know, or we have a very good idea of, what our symptoms are, what we even kind of might make our own diagnostic. We just can't prescribe our own medicine. So we go to the doctor to have her confirm, is this what I have? This is what I think I have. And so it's very interesting that you see kind of the traditional doctors, they're still kind of sticking to their kind of goddess role, right? And like, I have all the answers and I don't communicate with you. You're just, this is what you have and this is what you need. Where the people, the doctors who have caught up with the modern patient, that they're communicating with their patients. And so I see the same thing with consumers. It's all about communication. And so there's just, instead of just broadcasting, the old traditional doctor, he broadcasts and the old company broadcasts and the new company engages and communicates with its customer.
Exactly. And I won't stay too long on this idea, but there's this company that I worked with not too long ago, and they were terrified of allowing reviews on their website because they were afraid of some negative reviews getting on there. But the problem was that they were then hamstringing themselves from the plethora of good reviews that have gotten on there. So in case in point, like you mentioned, you want to go to a doctor's office or you want to go to a restaurant. First thing you do is you look up the reviews, right? You're not just looking up the social proof. What you're doing is you're trying to find out what are the stories that people are telling about this place.
Right.
Because now we're at a position where we can do that. We can see what kind of community is this place creating. Are there people who love this place? What do they say about this place? What were their experiences and how did they experience it? As opposed to, again, even 10, 20 years ago where this wasn't like possible or even a big thing, you just had to take the company's word for it that they were amazing or that they could deliver. So today, the companies that are really doing well are not the companies that are a one-way megaphone, with ads and to an audience, but the kind of company that cultivates a sort of transparency in showcasing things like reviews, feedback and testimonials and client stories and so on. So it's not just you saying how awesome you are, it's also your tribe marketing with you like an ambassador, right?
Right.
So we're all telling stories about you.
Yeah, exactly. What would you say then are some of the key ingredients to have in place before we, the listeners or entrepreneurs now trying to get into telling their own stories? So what would you say do you have to have in place before you sit down and write stories?
Yeah. I think the first thing has to be awareness of yourself and your story. And this is why I say we're totally getting into the right brain field, which is maybe not comfortable for a bunch of people because you can't measure it, you can't pinpoint stuff, but in a way you can. And I'll use myself as an example here. These past decade or so, I have completely grappled with what my story is. And I had to, have you seen the movie Inception?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had to sort of incept myself, and I did this like 2 months ago, and go dig deep down into all the competing stories in my head about myself. So I'm a kid here, I'm 31, right? So I've experienced a bunch, but I've never sat down to sort of organize the stories that I want to believe about myself. And it wasn't until it was a Saturday afternoon, my wife was on Instagram and I was sitting on the couch and my little kid was playing Minecraft right next to me, and I had my notebook, and it was just, I realized there's two narratives going on in my head. There's a dark one and then there's a light one. There's the story of failure and fear that I tell myself, and then there's the story of, hope and creativity and fun that I also tell myself. And these two, the dark wolf and the light wolf, are constantly battling inside me, and it just depends on which one I feed. But because they're both sort of meshed up together, I have no idea which one I'm feeding half the time. So I drew a line down the center of the page and I started listing out what are all the stories I tell myself about who I am and why I think I'm a failure. And I listed all of those, like, wow, if that was all there was in me, yes, I'm a failure. Then I went and listed the other side. What are all the stories I like to think about? The stories where I'm proud of myself, moments that I'm happy with who I was. I want to be more of that kind of person. So I listed all of those and realized that's a far stronger narrative. And my brand is built on that. And I realized somewhere along the line, this little 8-year-old, 13-year-old kid who was incredibly creative, never took no for an answer, figured stuff out on his own, and loved to create opportunities where other people could be enchanted by the same stuff that he was enchanted. Somewhere along the line, that little boy had gotten lost or died. And I needed to bring him back to life. And it was incredibly liberating to do that, to take all of my right brain and maybe force a little left brain in there and organize that. Once I did that, I now am getting a better sense of who I am. And then what are the kinds of stories that I want to tell? Because every day we're bombarded with a ton of stories that we create ourselves, or that we hear from other people, or that our brand is creating. So if you want to start telling more of your own stories, you have to come back to who you are, which is why your program, Sarah, is so brilliant. The anxiety-free marketing, it really is about getting back into where is your heart and what is it meant to be. Mm-hmm. Once you know who you are, you can then let go of the stories that don't matter and start focusing on the stories that do.
It takes a lot of courage, doesn't it, to go deep and then, really for me, what it meant, I had to let go of this marketing mask that I've been wearing for so many years, because it's almost like we didn't look at our own stories. We just looked at everybody else's pretend story and then tried to kind of fit in or somehow belong and kind of be like them, right? Rather than what you suggest is going into your own stories and then saying, this is my story and this is the kind of people that, I want to surround myself with. And I think that is super important in all of this storytelling, because if you don't start there, then you're just going to go back to broadcasting, because you're in this marketing, you probably still wear this marketing mask, and you sit down and you think, okay, let me tell stories. What is this program about? Okay, let me push out some information to get people to buy this program, where that's not what we're trying to do, because then they're just buying instead of buying into, right?
Mm-hmm. No, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes some deep inner work. And sometimes people shy away from that, because you might find some things like you did, like, there's some dark sides to all the stories. So it's not necessarily what people want to, take time to do. They think, yeah, but I got to, do more, publish more, and all of that. So Dominic, I feel like our values are a really integral part of storytelling. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm going to take that phrase like a step further and say you can't really tell a story that means anything unless there's a value in it, right? So I love this little phrase. Stories are little engines of belief. Every story comes loaded with preconceptions, mindsets, attitudes, beliefs, and culture. So I like to say stories are zip files of how to act and be. So absolutely, they bring values. I think stories are a way to dramatize your values. That's why we share them, to create connection by inviting people to see the world the way we do. If you think back at fairy tales and myths and the Avengers, right? Yes, they're full of all kinds of happenings, but why do we love them? It's because we love characters and the choices they make and why the choices matter. And we agree with the characters that, yes, if I had your powers and I was in your position, I would act the same way, because this is the way the world should be. Innocence should be safeguarded, and the underdog should be given a chance, and evil must be fought against, and creativity, should be rewarded, and whatever, right? It's all about the whole shoulds and shouldn't. So when you tell a story, and again, the best stories are not the ones that lambaste you with the values. That's maybe a fable, or one that leaves you with a clear moral at the end. Not exactly a story. A story is something that has it implicit. You take it in like eating something amazing, and it goes to work inside you. And if you already agree with that story, then you're already accepting, the value, the premise, and it then sort of starts working on you from the inside. Like I say, it's a little engine of belief. So a story is an invitation to connect and to be a friend. When we both laugh about the same things, when we cry, or we bond, or we share emotions, we get fired up, we're agreeing that, yes, this is how people like us act and are. And these are the stories that we tell ourselves about how to do things in the world, or how to think about life.
Right.
So absolutely, values are integral to storytelling.
Two important things you said. One is, I love this expression, engine of beliefs. So very important to remember that. And then the other thing is, you referred to, fairy tales like 100 years ago or so. Well, probably not 100, but a long time ago. We all have these fairy tales where, like you said, the morale of the story is at the end. So that's not what we're trying to create with our stories, right? Exactly. We're not here to give moral lessons to everyone, and that's not what we refer to as values. The values are an integral part of the stories. The other thing you mentioned several times now, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and kind of the, what we're wanting to change so kind of like the hero and the evil in a way, right? It's like, this is what we're rallying against, and this is what we are rallying for. And therefore, if you have the same values and you're rallying with us against this situation, person, whatever. What I was struggling with, and you helped me a lot with that when I had you kind of work on the manifesto, the Gentle Business Manifesto. And if listeners haven't read that yet, you can download it for free, no opt-in, at theGentleBusinessRevolution.com. So the Gentle Business Manifesto, you helped me, because what I struggled with is talking about a situation that we rally against. So we no longer want this. In my case, it's the current marketing paradigm, the current situation of online marketing. So yes, we're saying this is bad, we need a change, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we don't necessarily want to finger point and, always talk bad about someone or something or a situation. So you really helped me with that and reframe it in a positive way. So not starting with the negative, but starting with the positive and, what the outcome is, or the future situation. I thought that was really important to point out, that just because we're rallying against something, we want change, doesn't mean we're only going to talk bad about someone or something, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, just to piggyback on all of that and values and so on, the thing that makes, or one of the things that makes men unique in the universe and really to ourselves is meaning. Right. We are a thing that hungers for meaning and for purpose, and to be able to say why, and then to find a reason, and words like should and ought and shouldn't, are incredibly metaphysical, and you're not going to find them in a laboratory anywhere, because, well, that's why modern culture grapples with so much of lifestyle and purpose and so on, because when you approach everything with the left brain, you're going to do a lot, but then you're in a hamster wheel, forever. And you have to detach, get a little more into that right brain. And that's why stories have endured for the last 100,000 years in so many different forms, because they're all about transmitting meaning across cultures, across time. And to your point, like fairy tales, they can be told the wrong way, they can be told the right way, and they have been told the right way for so long because they've endured for thousands and thousands of years. And it takes a certain amount of maturity to be able to see why they matter. That's why we tell a lot of them to children early on, to start, again, it's a little engine of belief. You start planting the stories of my culture into the children, so that they grow up with these narratives, And the same thing with your brand. You start putting stories out there. You're doing the same sort of thing. You tell the same kinds of story long enough, and you will continue to bond with an audience or a tribe, and then they will start telling the same stories to themselves and to others.
Right. Yeah, so true. I feel like in marketing, we have 10 plus years of experience in talking at our customers. So broadcasting too, right? And it's like this thing, like you said, it's like almost like telling the brain, no, now you're switching, you're using the other half. And it really is this mindset shift to start telling them stories and talk with them instead of at them. And I feel like it's not that easy to do that switch.
No, you're right. Because you can't really quantify it, right? But then you look at TED Talks and you're like, what's the quantifiable value of a TED Talk, right? There's no call to action. There's no sale. What's the ROI of a TED? Well, it's infinite today, right? Now that we understand the purpose of a TED Talk, it's to get up there, tell a world-changing story, and invite people to see the world the way you do, and then let them make the choice of how they want to respond.
Yeah.
And TED Talks have redefined how public speaking is being done, and I think it's a good thing. Right.
Yeah.
So to what you're saying, I'm going to say it's more than 10 years. I say it's 100 years of broadcast advertising that talks at us. So it's been happening for generations. It's the air that we've become used to breathing. So it is a complete mindset shift. to think differently, and it will take us a while. But that's the nice thing about stories. That's why I love them.
Right.
They have staying power. They're repeatable. They're timeless. When we love them, we want to share them, right? No one falls in love with an ad or saves it to their bookmarks to watch again and again, or pulls it out when the family's over and says, hey, let's watch this. If they are doing that, it's because there's a story there.
Yeah.
Because the ad is a story-based ad, right? So I like to think that an ad is a one-way conversation. It's a broadcast. But a story expects an audience response. For people who are, giving a TED Talk, when they're telling a story, in that moment, they're looking into the eyes of the audience and they're seeing a response, because this is the fun thing about stories and how the brain works and so on. When you're telling a story, you get the difference between your mind and your body, and your body can't tell time when it comes to narratives. That's why we love going to watch a movie and so on, because your body thinks, well, I guess we're in this situation. Let's start reacting as though the T-Rex is actually chasing us, or though I'm loving the main character too, or I need to figure out what the puzzle is. Your mind knows it's not actually happening right now, but your body thinks, oh, heck yeah, it is. And all the hormones are going in the whatever and so on. So when you're telling a story, people are able to literally enter into experiencing that with you. And if the story is powerful enough and it creates a visceral reaction enough, sometimes change can happen very quickly. But more often than not, what happens is people love to go share that experience with other people.
Right.
So that's why we tell them to enchant people and then to have them come back to hear it again. So stories create a platform for activity, and you invite people onto that platform with you. So they're like a connecting tissue between people. So if you think back to like the Iliad, and the great myths of the ancient world, we're still telling those stories today because they say things about the human condition and how people should react and how we should think. They define an age. They define a people, culture, a tribe. So when you tell a story that people love, it's no longer your story. It becomes our story.
I love that. And I love that you brought up TED Talks, because that's really what you are doing with your work today, is helping people, public speakers, telling their stories on stage, which adds another dimension. I was talking mainly about, stories in emails and stories in sales pages and all of that. But when you get to also bring your personality to the story, that definitely adds another dimension to this connection with the audience. And I love that that's your focus today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even if you're not a TED speaker or a public speaker, sharing your stories in email and landing pages and an ebook, but if you do it on video as well,
right?
Like in an Instagram story, or a video in your YouTube channel, or even if you send that video out. The point is, and again, this is why TED Talks have become such a unique touch point for how communication happens when it happens well today, because TED Talks are at the same time given to an audience and at the same time given one-to-one to billions of viewers through their computers. At the same time, it's intimate, and at the same time, it's to an audience. So when you tell your story to your audience, and you can just be somebody holed up in Alaska, but sharing powerful stories and building up an audience of people, or following your group, or on your Facebook page, whatever. Stories are, again, it's about creating a connection with people who want to share the same values. And again, this is like we were talking, I think earlier, how a story can't just be anything. It can't just be about just anything that happened. It actually has to have a point. If you want it to be doing something, just retelling a simple action doesn't stick. It doesn't act. It's not doing anything. Like I say, if it's an engine of belief, it's got to actually be working on something, and that's kind of why you have to step back. And from a sort of a very meta point of view, is look at the story as, what is this story trying to communicate? What is the deep idea that this story is tapping into, or is sort of helping to keep this idea going? And you'll find the best communicators are always the best storytellers.
What would you say, and we're coming to an end here, what would you say would be some tips on how to, get that other side of your brain activated, like to, turn on that switch to turn on the creativity? Do you have any recommendations?
It's a good question. I think the exercise that I went through myself is going to help a lot. It's got to be where you start, because if you're, we run around with like suitcases of our past rattling around inside us, and not many of us are used to sort of going in and organizing the shelves. So if you go ahead and do that, and again, if we're talking about this in light of our business, so your brand exists not just because you sell a service, but you're offering a particular kind of experience, and more often than not, you're delivering that experience in a specific way, or because you want to see a specific thing happen in the world. So really, your business exists to help you bring some kind of meaning, or make some kind of meaning happen, or some kind of change happen to the world. So that's kind of the end goal. And then if what you need are stories from your life to back that up, then kind of what you need to do is go take stock of your interior warehouse. So pull out a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle, and make a list of all the stories that perhaps do back up and then don't back up that dream, that vision. I mean, you can use the same exercise for, like, if you're grappling with yourself, who am I? Who do I want to be? And that's how I use the exercise. And then found out that, well, my brand is me. And so I'm, working on refining and honing that. Once you've got those two lists, decide which one that you want to talk about. And I'm pretty sure everyone's going to pick the sort of the good side. So make a choice, and this is the thing. This is kind of one of the reasons why left brain is fantastic. Right brain is usually a chaos of creativity and thinking and intuition and emotion and so on, but it's not usually very organized. And that's why externalizing something, turning it into something physical, and getting it outside of yourself and looking at it, starts to make it real and make sense. So pick the column and realize these are the stories, that I'm going to tell. And then maybe out of those, pick the top 3 that really work best.
Yeah, and I liked the idea of having 2 columns, left and right, and then your creativity gets turned into action and doing something with that. So great advice. Thank you so much, Dominic. Yeah, this has been fascinating to me, and again, I just want to remind everybody again that you really helped me with the manifesto. So if you haven't seen that yet, please go and have a look at the gentlebusinessrevolution.com. Not only did Dominic help me with the editing and the story, but also with the design. So thank you so much, Dominic, for that. And please let people know where they can find you to find out more about you.
Sure. So my website is dreamagainmarketing.com. And on social, I live on LinkedIn every day. So if you visit the website or search for Dominic de Souza, you'll find me there. I also have an Instagram, and just recently started a Twitter. So that should be fun. Get a little more thoughts and more fun out there. But dreamagainmarketing.com.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me and for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
Again, if you haven't seen the Gentle Business Manifesto that Dominic helped me not only edit but also design, I invite you to download a copy without opt-in at thegentlebusinessrevolution.com. So that's it for this episode of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast. Please find the show notes of this particular episode at sarahsanacroce.com/GBR5. That's GBR5. And please check out Dominic's website at dreamagainmarketing.com. He also has a free playbook to help speakers capture their captive audience, build a tribe, and make the income they need without selling from stage. And you can download that at dreamagainmarketing.com/playbook. Next week, I'll be addressing the 5th P of the mandala, which stands for pricing, and I'll be talking to Farnoosh Brock on the topic of selling with integrity. I hope you'll join me on this journey to a kinder marketing paradigm, and please invite your friends to join us by sharing this podcast or the Gentle Business Manifesto with them. Both can be found at thegentlebussinessrevolution.com. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. I look forward to